Well, hey everybody, how are you doing? It is Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer. Welcome back for another Immigration Live Q&A. And well, it's Friday. And I think if you guys are anything like me, I have been waiting for this weekend. It has been a crazy week. Fortunately, this live stream is not just me, backed by popular demand. We have Alicia who is joining us, and pretty soon this will be the Alicia show. And Mark will go run away and hide somewhere, putting the blankets over my head and going to sleep. That's how I feel. That's how this week has wrapped up for me. But the weekend is here. We're excited to do this. This is the thing that gives us the energy to keep going forward, just helping and giving and answering your questions about Canadian immigration. So, Alicia, how has the week been for you?
You know what? It was super busy, and then I had to carve yesterday out. I had to volunteer for 12 hours with a whole bunch of junior high students. They needed a parent
Nice.
chaperone for band camp, so I was out there, and it was minus 22 or something like that. And we were out there, and we were doing a climbing wall, and the kids were rehearsing, and they had all sorts of teachers who were there to help them and actually work on their instruments specifically.
Mhm.
And then we were doing archery out there. So yeah,
Oh, awesome.
it was brisk but beautiful, right? It was really
Yeah.
nice to get out there. It was along the river, and there were beautiful birches and all sorts of nice sunshine, even though it was cold. So
Yeah.
it was good.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice just to see the kids able to actually get back to some form of normal, lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really hard because they had to cancel it, and it was supposed to be overnight. They're not allowed to do overnight, so they had to bus them out, and parents had
Oh.
to drive separately, and everybody's got masks on, and everybody has to space, and all the protocols. So, but they
Wow.
did it. They're out there, so it's good.
That is, yeah, it's so nice to see that. I think of what my kids have, given up and yours over the last little stretch here. And it's just so, yeah, it's so nice to see something returning back to somewhat normal. But things are crazy here in Canada, right? We've got truckers blocking everything, and you know, um, how's your food storage? Do you have a good a good stockpile of of food? It's yeah,
Oh
it's pretty
dear.
crazy.
Yeah, well, I had a little garden in the summer, and so we have a
Mhm.
community garden, and I've got my frozen kale, but it's not going to last too long.
All right. Well, Alicia, we will do a few shout outs here, and everybody is like, here's Ben's comment, and we will definitely get to Ben's. So hang in, Ben. We will get to yours because everybody's like +1 Ben's comment. So this is one of the questions that people have more. Yeah, I love this +1 to Ben Yang's question. So we will, by popular demand, we will definitely answer Ben's. Let's give some shout outs to everybody. So we've got the animal lover from Algeria. That's so awesome. Yes, you are, brother. You're always in the lives. It's good to see you. Okay, and let's see. We've got De La Cruz here. Good morning to you. And Terry-Ann, we gave Terry-Ann a shout out already. And we've got Sugdeep from Punjab. Great to have you. We are appreciative of your appreciation. So that's excellent. And those of you who are asking questions, hang on those. We will get to those. Thesura here, you got a nomination from the ONP and received your
Yay.
ITA in the previous round of invitations. I just met with another client this morning who had the same thing, Thesura. So it's great. Thesura is an alumnus of the Express Entry course, so he's all ramped up. He's going to be ready to file that application. So yeah, big congratulations to you. We'll give him a little bit of applause. Good for you, Thesura. That's awesome. Okay, we've got Han, who's from Uzbekistan. Hey, I don't know if we've had anyone from Uzbekistan for a while. If we haven't, it's probably, or if we have, it's probably been you, Han, because there really isn't a lot. Parth, good to see you. Thanks for joining this live session. And let's see what else we've got here. Trying to see. Greetings Sunday from Nigeria. Good to see you. And like I said, we'll get to all the questions once we've given a few shout outs here. And part of the reason, you guys, why I do that is just to give some time for people to connect in, those who are just seeing the live stream, that it's in their feed, and just to give them a little bit of time before we we spend just a touch of time talking about a few things and then jumping into the live Q&As. All right. So Gagan Singh, good to see you right here. We're doing just great. Of course, I'm answering for Alicia. How are you, Alicia? Are you doing good?
I'm doing really well. It really helped to take a little bit of a breather yesterday and get outside. So even though it was
Mm-hmm.
cold, I'm glad to be out there.
Yep. All right, we got another one. I'll give a shout out for Plant-Based Phil. Awesome. First time watching your live. Welcome, Phil. It's great to have you here. And as a reminder, subscribe to the channel, you guys, and make sure that when we do post the notification as to when we're going to go live, just ring that bell so you get the reminder so that you don't miss out. Okay. Sunday says, well done, Mark and Alicia. God bless you. Thank you. I don't know about Alicia, but I need all of the blessings that I could possibly get. So, okay, let's see here. From Icy Halifax, the protest is an experience of a lifetime. Yes, it is. Book a consult, guys, for specific question. I did, and I greatly appreciated it. Brianna. Okay, that's super. Thanks, Brianna. I love it when people who've gone over to our site here and have clicked on and booked a consultation with us. I love it when they come on and just let other people know that, well, here we go. We'll get back to Alicia, that it was actually worth their time. And obviously we do all that we can to make sure that happens. Okay, let's see what else we have here. I think we're just about done here. Chaitanya, good to see you as always. And Sabia says it is minus 27. Sabia, where are you? I think it's warming up here a little bit, isn't it, Alicia? What temperature is it for you? Oh yeah, look at that. We're sitting right here in Lethbridge. If you can see that, it's 7 degrees anyway. So I think we got a little bit of a glare on the phone, but it's 7 down here. So everything's melting. And yeah, that's the way things roll here. That's the way they roll. Okay. Hello to Nicola. And lots of people are posting questions. So hang tight and we will start going through those. Assam's in India. Or I should say, Sharma is in Assam, India. And Sajad, longtime follower, good to see you. Tadas, good to see you over in Montreal. And we've got someone connecting in from Morocco. Wonderful. And let's see what else we have here. Mariana is over in Toronto, over in Chanel's hometown there. So it's good to have you connecting in. And Sakina. So Sakina is from Morocco. Hello to you. Nisrin, hello. And Han as well is saying good evening. And we've got Shane is tuning in over in England. Freedom to all countries and people. There you go. And Aisha, we'll say hello to you. And Raghu. Okay, I think we've done a good job of trying to connect. Any plans for muffins? You know what? I don't know if there's some other meaning behind that, but I'm actually trying to eat healthier now. So I'm cutting back on the muffins, my friend. Okay.
You know what? We have to make muffins every Friday. So today's our muffin day.
Is today the muffin day? Oh, that's great. All right. So I think this is a good lead in. Lots of people are wondering what's happening with the processing times. You guys have seen that, we've talked, it's probably we get at least a third of our questions are how long is it going to be? And I appreciate you pointing this out, Emmanuel, because ultimately the main priority of IRCC right now is to deal with the backlogs in all their forms. And so this is why many of the visa offices are starting to pump out those passport requests. And this is why I'm saying that about mid-year, maybe sooner, like we should start to see the rounds of invitations start to return. But the minister in my discussions with him was very clear that they needed to clear up the backlog. And he was also very honest about the fact that it's hard to hire officers. And so you could have $85 million and, a large portion of that, designated towards hiring new officers, but it takes time to hire them and to train them and with everything going on. So this is very, very positive news. And I hope anyone who's asking questions about processing times will remember that, we, Alicia and I, we don't have our finger on the pulse of processing. We circle back with our colleagues and, in the CBA all the time. And we do kind of internal polls trying to see, what people's experiences are with processing times, but it's really kind of all over the map. And yes, some are going through faster than others. First in, first out isn't necessarily always the case, especially when it comes to temporary applications like study permits, where some they can approve very quickly without an officer looking at it, where others need to be triaged for an officer to review. That causes delays. And so, but this is very positive news. So I'm very, very happy to see this. Yes. And so I won't have enough time, I don't think, to get through everybody. Chaitanya. Okay. This is hilarious. Come to Canada, they said. It will be fun, they said. Not with all this. I think we've got a snowman there. Snow. I am going back in my man cave. That is awesome. And this person, Hazard Prime, says, thank you for all you do. We really appreciate that. Okay, so let's slide over and let's just address this one here, FSW, any hope? I think, Alicia, if we share our screen here and we look, the government is continuing to issue the PNPs. And this is an important factor for anyone who has multiple options. Provincial nominee programs are absolutely the one that the government is committed to continuing to approve. And we saw this, another large, number of people that have been invited, which is really, compared to previous rounds. This is, I expect, if we don't do more regular rounds, that the number of people going through is just going to be increasing. And so this is really kind of irrelevant. It basically means that the lowest person had a 74 cutoff, right? And then they had the 600 points. So that's kind of where we're at. It's been PNPs. We haven't seen a lot of change. And part of the reason I want to talk about this, Alicia, is to hopefully, if I skip past your question about are there going to be draws, where are things at, this probably makes sense for us to address. Take a look at this and remember this was as of January the 31st. Okay, so today's February the 4th. So in the time period when they took this snapshot, there were a couple more days before the 2nd where additional people could have piled in. But you can see here, there was 983 here, over 600. And PNP, you have to be over 600 or you're not going to get drawn. And you look here and there was 1,070. So realistically, in that period of time from the 31st to the 2nd here, there was, that difference. There was another 70, 80, just about 90 people that quickly got their profiles in and adjusted the nomination that they received. So keep that in mind. But those who are asking, what are the scores going to be? What will happen if FSW is launched again? Well, lots of people have held off. Lots of people have had profiles that have expired. And one of the strategies that people are doing is they're not renewing their profiles because they're trying to submit their study permit applications and are trying to tell immigration now that, and I'll just flip back to this scene. They're trying to tell immigration now, oh, okay, I don't actually want to become a permanent resident. Now I just want to apply for a study permit. And so even though they were already in the system as showing that intention, they are now just letting their profiles lapse, going with the study permit and then hoping to revive it after if the study permit gets approved. I don't know your thoughts on that, Alicia, because they're already in the system. And some people are, and this is another thing before I flip it over to you, other people are saying, well, do we withdraw our profile? And is it important to withdraw it? But, to say, okay, we've changed our mind and now we're actually just going to study and then go home and use that education to advance our career opportunities in our home country. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if there has been a profile, even if it's been withdrawn, I always tell people to address it. So don't try to sweep it under the carpet because immigration knows it's there. So if you're now changing your intention and you're going to go and pursue a study permit application, okay, but have some sort of reasonable rationale for what you were doing before. If you had an express entry profile, why you took it down, what your thinking is, how your life circumstances may have changed, because you always have to tie it back to that temporary intent. And you can have a dual intent, you're allowed, but you still have to have the ability to show that you are going to return home at the end of your authorized stay. And so you still have to have that temporary intent. So deal with the fact that you had that express entry profile and tell a reasonable explanation or give a reasonable explanation for why you took it down and what your intention is going forward.
All right. I'm going to pull up Mr. Ben Yang's question here. So we'll start off with this one. So he says, hi, Mark, if the draw resumes, it will be very hard for international students with postgrad work permits to have CRS 500 plus. Do you think IRCC will do anything for us? So my short answer is yes. I think that the Minister Fraser, one of the things he said was that international students were a priority for them. They are mindful of what's happening. They don't, excuse me, they very rarely do they need to go on YouTube to figure out what people are experiencing on the ground. They have a little bit of an idea. You know, there may be some nuances of the ramifications of what they do that they're not quite sure about, that they don't see like we do as immigration lawyers, because we're we're right on the ground. But that's one of the advantages, and why we as a Canadian Bar Association try to, you know, liaise and work with them so closely. But this issue is something that our Minister Fraser is very, very keenly aware of. Now, we just completed a submission. You know, he had asked us to provide him with ideas and thoughts on what they could do, you know, for pathways for you guys, just like this. And so we formed a working group. And the first thing we addressed was the fact that status is going to be expiring. Some of your postgrads are going to be expiring. And the natural and most reasonable thing for them to do, the easiest thing, is just to open up another 18-month extension of time to allow people in whatever window that they designate to be able to extend their stay. So obviously when they do that, they gives you another 10 or however many points, CRS points per year of work. So that's another factor. But ultimately that's just buying time. And it's just, you know, there's always, understand, not everybody who's an international student is going to be able to become a permanent resident. And that's one of the greatest misconceptions. And I see a lot of schools and education agents that are pushing that. Come to Canada, study, and you've got a pathway to permanent residence. Well, that is not the case. There is no guarantee of it. But the Canadian government highly values international students as being some of the best candidates for permanent residence. So if we have a process to at least bide time for those who are going to fall out of status, including a policy that allows for restoration to this work permit, then I think that will help to at least extend a little bit more stay, for the draws to start, for the big, massive, high human capital pool to be flushed out and issued invitations, and then to start to see the scores coming down. But you're right. Most postgrad students are not going to be ranking up into even 490. You know, they may still be 470, 480. And so we met yesterday with, I think there were 9 of us that we had pulled together to think of pathways forward. And interestingly, we looked at a lot of things. You've heard me talk about LMIAs and potentially going down that route, which I think is for them to open up an advertising exempt LMIA that will allow employers who currently employ postgrad work permit holders to apply for an LMIA to support the ongoing work of that individual, which would then also give them an extra 50 points. So that's a more long-term solution, but they have to work with ESDC to do that. And it may not be possible. So what other alternatives? Yes, they can reopen the TR to PR pathway, which personally, I wouldn't have an issue with that. I think that would be great. But who's the winners and who's the losers? You know, who is going to be on that list? And then one of the things that we had talked about, which we're probably going to put into our submission to the minister, is something that is kind of like a CEC plus, is kind of how we describe it. So it's outside of express entry, but it targets specific cohorts, whether it's international students that have graduated, you know, from an institution at this time or within this window, or whether it's certain essential workers, but carving out a separate program that goes through CEC that maybe requires 18 months of work experience to be eligible, but allows for a pathway that does not affect the draws and what's happening with express entry right now, but targets people that are in Canada, focuses on the specific folks that are stuck here. And I think all of us felt probably they went too far with the TR to PR pathway, because many international students who were still in school hadn't yet even applied for their postgrads were eligible to take up those spots that others who maybe didn't have their language test or didn't have something ready at the time really are farther along in the priority scale and are running out of options. And so we felt that maybe that net was cast a little bit too broad. But those are just some of the things that we're talking about, Ben. And so the minister obviously has the ability to, to easily tweak express entry to make little changes as well. But those are some of the ideas. So Alicia, I know I've kind of dominated the discussion here, but I wanted to share some of the things that we're doing within the Canadian Bar Association as far as ideas and thoughts. And so what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and it's interesting, Mark, because I wrote that big blog post article about people in this exact situation. So if you're in
Yeah.
Canada, you've done your studies in Canada, you are on a PGWP, and you're starting to worry now because your time's running out. And I've had a few consults over the last week about this very scenario where people have contacted me and they said, this is me. Like my postgrad work permit's expiring in the next few months, or maybe they have a little bit more than the next few months, but this year, right? It's expiring in 2022. And I said, well, did you do anything in the TR to PR pathway? They said, no, because I had, a CRS in like the 470s.
Yeah.
I figured it was going to be way faster and way better to go through CEC. They were counting on those draws happening in the fall, and they just never happened. And so there's a bunch of people who are stuck right now and are trying to figure out, well, can I go through the LMIA process with my employer? What are my other options, right? And it's hard for a lot of people because unless you have a master's degree or a PhD, you're not getting usually above that 500 mark. Um, the main area where people have lost a few points is on language, especially if their language tests are old and they just haven't bothered to take a new IELTS. Or if you're in Canada, one thing too is you could try taking the CELPIP, because sometimes people do better on the CELPIP.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing to consider. And you can go ahead and try that right now, do your study classes for it, and invest a little bit of time right now to work on improving your language. If you know that you've lost some bands on your language, then book another language exam, try the CELPIP, maybe redo the IELTS, because that might be just enough to be able to get you over. But it's tough for a lot of students right now, and I'm hoping that, yeah, they will implement some sort of forward-looking program, because people are relying on this, right? They've set up
Yeah.
their whole lives,
Their whole life.
and they had a way, they had a pathway that's now no longer open to them. And so hopefully immigration recognizes that and will institute some other means. If they don't open up the regular CEC draws, then some
Yeah.
other means.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, because I look at the consults that I've had recently, Alicia. So I had just today, one individual in Australia and one in the US. And the symptoms that we're seeing here of demand for global mobility are being felt in other countries. And one of the things that I see, at least here in Canada versus say Australia or the US, is that Canada really, really values immigrants. And even though there are realistic constraints, whether it's the annual levels plan where they can't let everybody in, they have to cap it, or there's, or trying to decide what to do with the people here that have really struggled because of the pandemic, whether it's with work or whatever. When I talk to the individuals that are in the US and Australia, there literally is no hope for them. So there isn't this faint hope that the minister is going to come and issue a policy to allow all of these individuals to extend their work permits. It's not going to happen. And so the discussions we have are seeing people go to other countries like Australia and the US, and I'm sure the UK fits into this as well. And when things start to go south, the reality is that there's no pathways, no options. But our department, our immigration department, is looking actively for ways to increase the levels, and we'll see it next week probably. We should see the annual levels plans come up this week coming up, and the moment they're released, we'll do a live video on it to talk about it, because those numbers dictate what the minister can do. So, and that's part of the reason he asked us for some direction before those, the numbers come out. Now, he doesn't have as much, direct impact or say on what those are. There's There's, it affects a lot of different aspects of, it's a cabinet decision essentially. But yeah, I think people have to realize that, as bad as things are right here, there's hope still. And, yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say too is I'm just really impressed with the listeners, the watchers, the viewers, because in the consults that I've been having, when I'm speaking with people, they've read the blog article, they've gone and done their research. They know that the minister's going to do some sort of announcement, by February 14th. They are doing their homework and they are on top of it. And that's going to make the difference in terms of, whether they will have an option.
Yep. We'll give you guys a shout out. All right, let's get crazy here. Let's start talking about everything. Okay, so Shahjad says, I got a request letter from CIC. Did you hear that? I don't even need to finish your question, Shahjad. Okay, client inquiry, please provide a settlement plan. I applied for CEC inland. What does this mean? Shahjad, book a consult with us, my friend. This is something anytime we have any ADR, any request, we direct you to book a consult because we need to look at everything. We need to understand everything. And so, yeah, it's not something that we're going to be able to give you any direction. In the context of CEC and providing a settlement plan, that it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't make sense. Like ultimately, you have to demonstrate that you have the ability to economically establish, but ultimately a settlement plan, there's something more here. I'm assuming there's maybe a PNP or something, or I don't know what could, be operating in the background here to elicit this kind of a request. Does anything come to mind, Alicia? This seems a little out of connection with CEC.
Yeah, or unless there was some sort of connection to Quebec, maybe
Yeah.
a past, work history in Quebec.
Yeah. So Shahjad, slide over here, my friend, and right up here, speak to a lawyer up here, and let's connect and let's see, because you guys have to, anytime this happens, you absolutely have to make sure that there is not something else operating in the background. And sometimes the only way we can do it is to go through your entire application and just see if there's something you answered, something you included that would trigger it. And that's one of the advantages that Alicia and I have, I guess, is that we've been at this so long that we know kind of the process that an officer goes through. We know what they're looking for, and we can see the same things that an officer is seeing when, based on the answers that you've provided. Okay. All right. Okay. Now we've got Hazard Prime again. That's awesome. Okay. He says, okay. Oh, wrong one. This one right here. That's the one. He says, I got an ADR for proof of funds. So AOR January 17th. So just recently, so AOR, January 7th, 2021, PNP Ontario. Since then, I changed jobs, pay raise, paid off the credit cards, saved money in addition to gift deed I initially showed. Do I need to provide details for all of the above? 100%, regardless of whether or not, you join us and book a consult. You're going to put every single thing in that you have available. And this is the interesting part, Alicia, because, when you have provided whatever proof of funds or whatever evidence to show, if they come back and ask for additional information, I throw everything, even new stuff in, anything that I can to show that, yes, I have all of that and prove it, as well as here's all the other things that I've done. Here's all the debt that I've erased, I've removed. That's no longer an issue. Your thoughts?
Well, and just be careful what stream you applied under as well, because a lot of those are employer-supported programs,
Yeah.
and so it depends on when you changed employers. You've got a positive obligation to notify them. For most of the OINP streams that are employer-based, that employer needs to meet very specific requirements in terms of, how many employees they have, where their source of business is, what kind of the size of the organization is. So just be really careful in looking at the original program parameters to make sure that you still meet all the eligibility requirements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's jump to the next one. So this one is from Eli, and he says, I'll be FSW 479. I had a client today that was 478. She actually was in the 480s, but she had a birthday, turned 30. So when I graduate in June, I know there's a lot of future uncertainty, backlogs, draw frequency, tier, but how do you see my chances? Eli, one of the things here, you're going to graduate and you're going to get a post-grad work permit. I'm hoping that it's going to be a 3-year. And I don't know what Alicia's position is, but under no circumstance would I ever advise someone to come and study for 1 year in Canada if you're looking for permanent residence. There may be a reason, maybe there's something that justifies how, you've got French and you've got, a job offer already. Well, not even that, but there's other factors. You've got a sibling in Canada. You've got all these other reasons to make up points. And really all you need is the 1 year. But I'll tell you, like, it's a precarious situation when you accept a 1-year program that only allows a 1-year post-grad work permit. And if you look back at the TR to PR pathway, Canada doesn't value those programs for PR anyways. They didn't open up the door for 1-year international graduates to go through the TR to PR pathway. So that should tell you something. So, there may be a reason, there may be, but we really just don't advise people to do that. So
I'm
yeah, go
wondering
ahead, Alicia.
too, Mark, Eli might be overseas or outside Canada doing his education, right? He might not be doing the
Uh,
Canadian education. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's not clear, Eli, if you have been studying in Canada or if you're studying outside of
Yeah.
Canada.
Okay. And that's a good point. Thanks for pointing that out. See, this is one of the challenges. And this is why I love having Alicia here, because, sometimes when we read the questions, it's hard to tell exactly this full background that we always get with our clients when we're doing consultations. And so, yeah, in your situation, 479, I think it's going to be a long time before the draws, when they resume, that would get back down to that level. Part of the reason, because of French, many people have not been just sitting, waiting. They've been studying French, and there's big points associated with that. And we're not sure what the ripple effect is. I know when they first added points for siblings, and they increased, well, really the siblings was a big one. When they added those extra 15 points for it, I saw that it impacted on the lower level of candidates being drawn. It went all the way down to 413 at one time for FSW. And then after that, we saw the institution of extra points for siblings. And I can't remember what the other was. If it was French, maybe a lower level point level for French. But anyways, at that stage, then the lower threshold for the draws, started to climb up. So yeah, in your situation, 479, I think it'll be a while. And, we don't know your age or anything. Once you hit 30, then you're going to lose another 5 points. And so, yeah, that's there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and that's why everyone and their dog essentially is applying for a study permit. And we know, and I will once again, and I did this yesterday, but I'm going to go on here and I'm going to point out again. Let's see if I can find it. I'm going to give a shout out to these lawyers who are doing a phenomenal job. I'm going to flip this over here. So Will and LJ and Zara, right here, these guys, they have 299 subscribers. Get over there and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Okay, get over here and subscribe. Maybe you listen to the podcast. I don't know, but Will and LJ here and Zara's a guest. She's getting more involved. They're on the cutting edge of what's happening with the Chinook system and where it's going. And this is a 2-hour one, this one here, but I can tell you it's worth watching every single minute of it. And the reason that I say that is because many people are applying for study permits. And if you want to increase your chances, like Alicia and I and Chanel, we pay very careful attention to how immigration is processing these study permits. And we build these suckers out as if we're going to court. Because ultimately, even when you've done nothing wrong, you've met all the requirements, we're still seeing refusals. And the data is showing that up to 25% are just wrong. Where the system they use is not, the right information isn't going across. And they've got like 4 or 5 minutes to review an application. So your nice detailed 10-page letter of explanation, your plan is not being reviewed nearly as closely as you think it is. So
And
yeah.
it's so frustrating, Mark. It's so frustrating because I mean, you still have to write that 10-page
Mhm.
study permit letter of intent because that's your key evidence if you have to take that on judicial review. But it's so frustrating on the study permit refusals where people have done everything, right? They have paid their full first year tuition.
Yeah.
They have shown that they have a Canadian GIC if they're doing SDS. They've got some extra money in their bank account. They've met every requirement that immigration has said publicly that they have to meet, and yet they can get refusals on financial reasons. So it's really frustrating. It's hard to figure out what the internal criteria might be that's causing those sorts of refusals right now.
Mhm. Yeah. And one thing we are starting to see is that the concept of refiling is really not as the future, let's just say, isn't as bright for refiling a second when you get the first one refused. Because one thing I think we can all assume is that a prior study permit refusal is going to be one of those factors that is going to cause the application initially to be treated or bounced out of the quick approval process. And in the past, if there was a refusal, us as officers, we could often call the program, send an email to the program manager, say, hey, look, there's a clear error in this decision. And the study permit, they completely disregarded the fact the person had $150,000 and everything paid for and money to support their whole stay in Canada. And they refused on financial grounds, right? We could have these discussions. But because of the massive number of study permits now, immigration is desperately looking for ways to triage, looking for ways to approve easy ones and then really batch refuse the other ones. And yes, there's no automated refusal, but all an officer does is, I'm going to refuse this and then pull up the drop down menu and choose what they want. And if the information they're relying upon has been itself kind of triaged and summarized and put in a place that's easier for the officers to see, that first person may not be transferring over accurate information, which then can result in refusals. And so that's why we put so much time, at least within our study permit applications, into making sure we've got everything covered. So if the time, if it's a refusal comes, which happens so frequently now, that we've got a good grounds to file that leave application.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So there we go. And we're trying to do this broad because I can see a lot of people asking similar forms of questions. So if we don't hit your exact question, it's because we've probably talked about it, when someone like Eli asks a question that we can expand on. We find that that's a little bit more beneficial than answering the same thing over and over again for 10 different people. So understand if that's why we skip you, that's why. Okay. Mariana says her CEC score is 494, but can't apply until July. Okay. I'm assuming, that probably maybe that's one when you hit your 1 year, I'm assuming. What does this mean for people who aren't in the pool yet? Language test results will expire in May of next year. Should I worry?
Um, I mean, there is some sort of prioritization, right, based on when you have your express entry profile in the pool. So yes, if you don't have your profile in the pool and you're not able or eligible to be in the pool until you actually meet your 1 year of Canadian qualifying work experience, then you're not going to get that priority for having your profile in the pool for a longer period of time. But it is what it is. You're not going to qualify for CEC until you have that 1 year. It's possible that if you have enough points to meet the minimum eligibility criteria for FSW, you could put your profile in. I don't know if you have work experience prior to whatever you're doing in Canada on probably a study permit. So some people don't, right? They don't have that foreign year of qualifying work experience, 1 year continuous. So maybe you don't qualify for FSW yet. Language tests, I mean, you can always retake another language test. The
Yeah.
fact that it expires next May, I don't think is a big problem.
No, I don't see. And really, it's the people right now, Mariana, that who have work permits, like their postgrad work permit that's expiring,
Hmm.
that are really in this desperate situation. And that's why we spent so much time talking about it at the beginning. And if you guys haven't gone over to the site holthelaw.com, and I'll show you how to find it once again. You just go over to our site here, and under the resource section right here, click on blog, and you'll see that there's a lot of stuff geared towards you guys, you international students. And we've done this because there's just so much misinformation out there, Alicia, that people, are spreading, and there's a lot of speculation. And in fairness, we speculate, but these are some tangible options. How long can I stay? These are some tangible options, and you guys, you have to look at this. Like Alicia covers a ton. Like it's not even, the page can't even catch up for how detailed this blog is. So definitely slide over there and take a look at it. And if you're in a situation where you're just not quite sure what to do, like don't hesitate to just click and book that consult, because the worst thing, I know, Alicia, I'm probably speaking for you as well, is to have someone book a consult, because people come to us at the last stage when they've exhausted all options. Well, I can tell you there was a time when we could fix pretty much everything, but that's not the case anymore. So
No,
the
and
best time is to come early.
yeah, I had a really tough consult the other day because somebody booked a consult with me, but they had been refused for two study permits in the past. They'd been refused for a TRV in the past. They, the history was on the study permit was all over the map. They'd been trying to apply for 1-year programs. The programs didn't meet what their previous studies involved, and there was a bunch of other things that caused significant problems that by this point, I just don't think are fixable anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is like, you guys have to appreciate that like we are not disconnected or dispassionate people. There's nothing worse for us than when we see someone who has come to us for help, and we genuinely, there's nothing that we can do. And yes, sometimes help is an honest answer that says you don't have any options. You're going to need to go home. Like there's value in that in and of itself, versus someone saying, "Oh, it'll be okay. It'll be okay." And I think one thing we're going to do maybe in the future here is to have a roundtable and pull all four of us on here and just talk about the week. I think that would be beneficial for people to see what we're seeing, and just to kind of provide a little behind the scenes on what it's like to be an immigration lawyer and working in a busy immigration firm with all of these challenges. And so, yeah, so
It,
it's heartbreaking.
it is hard, and I hate to be in the position to tell somebody, I don't think you have a chance on round 4 on an application to Canada, but I don't want to be telling people something that isn't grounded in reality, right? If I have to give that hard message of saying, we've gone through all of your circumstances, we've kind of reviewed everything that we can review together, and it looks like because of what happened in these past 3 applications and the information that you provided and the fact that it's inconsistent and the fact that, family has refusals and maybe there wasn't something else that was disclosed, there's a significant risk. And it's no longer just, well, let's just try for another study permit
Yeah,
because now
yeah,
you've got that record of strikes
yeah.
against you.
Yeah. And like we said before, with this new Chinook system, which is, it's being rolled out. It really is. Not just study permits or visitors, work permits, like it's being rolled out in every way they can. Obviously, because of the massive volumes, you have one experienced officer that can pump through, 100 applications, maybe, in a day versus, versus 20. And so there's clear advantages in efficiency, but it becomes really difficult. So this is another thing I want to point out. That first application that you submit, you have to be very, very careful who you're using. And if your consultant or your lawyer is not taking great care in that first application and is just doing the bare minimum, whatever immigration asks, that very likely is not going to be enough. And once you've got that one strike, more than ever before, is it going to become, increasingly difficult to see that second application approved, let alone the third or fourth. So it's the first one, you've got to do it. And, we charge what we do for a reason, because for many people, this may be your only ticket to permanent residence in Canada. And if you can get that study permit, then yes, there's no guarantee, but it will give you options that you may never have if you are unable to get the study permit approved.
Yeah, and I really second what you said earlier, Mark, about the 2 years, because I was talking to a client just recently and they were saying, "Oh, are you sure I can't just do the 1-year program?" And I said, "Look, like I was talking to somebody who had relied on oh, I'll be able to get a job after my 1 year. I'm keen. I've got good marks. They thought they could do it, and then the pandemic hit, and then their employer had to lay people off for a month. And now all of a sudden, you no longer
12
have a year
months.
of Canadian work experience because
Yep.
of 1 month, right? And there was nothing they could do about it. So just that 2 years, it gives you the full 3 year option on the postgrad work permit, and it allows you some flexibility to deal with life and circumstances that you can't foresee.
Yeah. All right. Next question is from Raghu. And Raghu says, can I remove one of my work experiences and add a spouse's CELPIP after getting an ITA after PNP nomination? I still have 70 points on the grid and PNP qualified. So I'm just going to flip my screen over and just, this is something that it's been a while since I've shared this, but anytime you're making any changes between the profile to the APR, this is where you go. So you can just look at the title, Google it, and it'll come up. And essentially what this is saying is that you need to make sure that if you are making any changes in between receiving that ITA and filing your EAPR, and you've already alluded to it, I think you're somewhat familiar with this, that there are no changes that would cause you to no longer be eligible for the underlying program that you're qualifying through, whether it's CEC or FSW, whatever it may be, or federal skilled trade, and that your points do not drop below the round of invitation level in which you were drawn. So that's the basic premise. But you've got some interesting things here. Alicia, do you want to tackle this a little bit for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on which PNP application program you are going through and what the program eligibility requirements for that. Um, so yeah, be careful. Make sure you're not going to go offside in terms of your settlement funds for your underlying requirements, also in terms of number of family members in your family and how that affects your settlement funds. If you're doing some PNPs, they will require you to have very specific language results. Maybe you have a requirement for a specific type of employer as well. So it's really hard to say if you can remove one of those work experiences if that was kind of the key work experience that you needed to rely on in order to make up a number of years of experience, or maybe that type of employer has to be of a certain size and have a certain number of employees working for them. So it's, you
Yeah,
know, be careful and
yeah,
I would say make sure to book a consult to get some more specific
yeah,
advice about your circumstances here.
yeah. And I'll also add, Raghu, so you said that you want to remove one of the work experiences. Why? Right? So that's the first thing. Is it because you can't get a reference letter, you can't prove it? And add a spouse's CELPIP. Well, if you've got the ITA, everything's locked in. So adding a spouse's CELPIP really isn't going to do anything. Like it doesn't add, there's no advantage to that. So these are just some of the things that pop up. And obviously when you're talking about having 70 points, we assume that's on the FSW grid, right? So because those, the 70 points, it's really the selection criteria associated with the federal skilled worker program and not CEC. So it's always tricky for us. And that's why we do recommend that you book a consult, especially when you've got a situation where it's very, very specific and it has big consequences if the decision you make is one that, because of a lack of information on our part, yeah, we don't want to give you advice without knowing all the facts, essentially. Okay, but thank you, Raghu. Okay, Rose says, do you think people with post-grad expiring in 2023, July, with CRS of about 474 need to worry? And you know what? This is the crazy part, isn't it, Rose? The fact that you guys now are actually having to ask these questions. Personally, over a year from now, I'm hoping that this pandemic will have softened, that the, travel restrictions and that the border closures and the, the lockdowns, that things will be able to, return to more normal worlds, that immigration processing, that they will be able to get through the backlog and start to resume a normal level of processing of applications. And, next week, hopefully we'll see, and the minister confirmed that, levels will go up, that they are going to be adding more spots. So 474, will it be enough if they were to do CEC alone? I think that probably that would be, eventually we would get down to that level, but you're going to still work, right, Rose? In another year from now, you're going to have more than 474, unless you're counting your 474 as being, July, by July 2023 or whatever, before your post-grad expires. And lots of times we don't know where you live. Are you guys in Ontario? Are you in, BC? Or are you in Alberta? And did you complete your studies in Alberta? And then, yes, there are options. And I'll be honest, I still really, really love our province, because your post-grad studying in, in a certain post-grad that are working in a field related to your education, you've got AOS, and you have opportunities.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Alicia?
Well, and just take a look at the Alberta accelerated tech pathways too. So
Mm-hmm.
people who have graduated from a Canadian university and are working in one of those tech streams, it's a new program in Alberta, the Alberta Accelerated Tech Pathway. It's not an AOS program. It's related to express entry. So you still have to meet all the basic minimum criteria for express entry as well. But if you can do that, and if you're working in a tech area, your knock is in a tech, and you have an employer who is working in the tech industry, and it's interesting that we'll have to look through these NAICS codes, so we'll probably more on this later, but the employer also has to be self-identified as in a tech industry. But there might be a pathway in terms of looking at accelerated tech programs for you in
Yeah.
Alberta.
And I'll also point out that it is possible for Outlanders to go through that program. And the AINP I had a meeting with the acting director just earlier this week. It's all a blur. And
Monday.
one wonderful guy, great guy. Him and another one of his one of the head directors or managers over the startup visas and the other program. She also attended, and it was clear to them that they are, they're willing, they want people with tech skills. They want to expand. The province has made this a priority for us to expand our tech sector. That's why they created the program. And so if you have an employer and you're outside of Canada, and that employer is willing to support you, you can get an R204C letter, which basically authorizes the issuance of a work permit for you to come and work before the application is finalized, which is a big bonus when you are looking at, 22 to or more months of processing. So that was something that I was really happy to see, Alicia, was that they were willing to use the 204C letter. So
it has to be an Alberta-based employer. So.
Yes, of course. Yeah, Alberta-based. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's see what Sukhdeep says. If I have a master equivalency from Wes, can I do another ECA just for bachelors only from another agency? Oh, okay. To reduce the CRS score to meet the OINP cutoff of 467 points, masters will not be hidden but mentioned in personal history. Sukhdeep, this is a scary thing to do. And we are seeing people do this. And you guys probably saw my video. If you haven't watched it, this is how crazy this is, Alicia. I don't know if you were kind of privy to this, but I want to share my screen and I'll show you. I had to do a special video yesterday. I liked my thumbnail, actually. It was pretty good. So fake news about the OINP debunking the fake email. So some creative person faked an email from me. Ironically, they used my stringham.ca email suffix. I don't know what. And it basically said that the OINP was looking at adjusting listen, this is not the case. I'm just describing the situation. I'm not saying this is what they're doing, but the email tried to claim that I told someone that I had a discussion with the OINP and that they were going to raise it up because the new cutoff for the FSW or the no program specified draws within express entry was going to be over 500. So it was better to increase your scores and make sure that you were up in the high part so that you could be competitive. That's what someone created this fake email. And so the reason that I had to debunk this, and it was going everywhere. It was spreading, like people were making these claims even on the Canada Visa site. Someone sent me an email. So this fake email. And so just go back and watch that video. But ultimately, it was totally not true at all. But I think the person who created it wanted people that were in this situation right here, who were trying to adjust, artificially, decrease their profile CRS score, because there's a slot for the OINP. And those of you who don't understand how this works, when the human capital priority stream does their notifications of interest, they pull from a slot. And usually that slot was always typically just under where they saw the human capital draws happen for FSW. So they would pull candidates that were otherwise not quite meeting the level to get an ITA, but they haven't changed that throughout this whole period. And so now there's speculation, for people who actually have higher scores, 480, 490, I have the knock experience, but I'm not getting drawn because I'm not in this slot of 467 down. Like, I don't know if it's 460 to 467. So anyways, so I believe that the person was sending out this, fake message to cause people to jump out of that group and go higher so that they had a better chance of getting a notification of interest. That's how corrupt this world is, right? And so please know that, you're going to hear it from here. Okay. If you haven't heard us saying this stuff, then, and I know the more recognized the Canadian Immigration Institute becomes, the more recognized Alicia and myself are, people are going to try to use that because you guys are trusting what we tell you. And that's what we want. We want you to have faith and believe in what we're trying to help you with here, and to create a source where people can trust the information that we're sharing, because there's so much out there. And so I even went into a WhatsApp group to let them know, no, this was a fake. So yeah, it was not pleasant, but just go watch the video and you can see what happened. So back to the story. Do I drop down? Do I change? And I'll be honest, I will never tell anyone to do that. I won't. Can you list that you're going to put it in your personal history? Yes. And it's a strategy. Are you only going to include your ECA in your application for the lower one? If you go to, IQUIS or one of the other ones, or the U of T, and get your bachelor's assessed from a different organization, and then just don't put WES in there. Well, I guess at a very theoretical level, you could do that. But boy, I'll tell you, it is so volatile. How do you know what knock code they're going to draw? Right? What if there is a normal draw and then it's at a level where you would have been drawn, and then you lose that opportunity? So it doesn't matter which way you go when you're trying to not game the system. You guys are doing legitimately whatever you can to follow the rules and to get through and to get drawn. And it seems quite unfair that you're a stronger candidate that has everything that the OINP needs, except for being in that CRS slot. So there we go. I don't know if you have anything more to add to that, Alicia, but this is the world we're in. It's crazy.
I mean, I would just say, oh, what a tangled web we weave, right? Like,
Yes.
Honesty is the best policy. So be upfront, make sure that you're following the rules. One thing I would say too is you can go on the OINP website and you can check, and it'll give the previous draws, it'll give the CRS bandwidth for what they drew from. And if it's one of the ones that requires certain occupations, that'll list the occupations that they drew from. So I mean, that's the authoritative source of information if you want to go and see what has been happening. Of course, nobody has the crystal ball. And so, it's impossible for people to say what might happen in the future unless there's been some sort of government information leak. The information that we give is just based on discussions that we have with Canadian Bar Association, with people who are in the trenches and are kind of seeing trends for what's happening. And so we're trying to give the best information based on legitimate sources that we know, and some of it we just simply can't predict, right? So there's a bunch of stuff that we're just saying, here's the best information that we have that we're sharing with you, but otherwise you just have to be honest and have whatever your life circumstances are properly reflected in your application.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a choice that you have to make, and that's one we can't make for you. And like Alicia said, we don't have that crystal ball. It's entirely possible that, the next OINP, it could, I say could, okay. They could increase the range. Maybe they bump it up to 480 and go 470 to 480, right? We don't know. And, But trust me, if we do hear anything, unlike others who would kind of hoard the information and say, oh, you can only, we'll share it. We've got this intel. If you, book a consult with us, it's the only way we're going to share the information. No, we share information freely. The reason we push people to book consultations is because then we can provide specific legal advice, something that we can't do within this realm. Okay, we are into overtime here. Alicia, do you have another appointment right now? I've got my CBA North section meeting that I was going to attend on, innovation in the law, but we'll answer a few more questions here. But hold off on posting your questions, and let's see if we can get through the rest of these. I love this one. Why is CPC Edmonton so slow in processing applications? When is the earliest can I do Mandamus or Mandamus?
So a mandamus application, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week as well. Usually it's a federal court judicial review application for a specific relief, which is mandamus. And it is, I am demanding the government has a positive obligation to act when you've put in an application, and it's reasonable to expect that the government will make a decision within a certain period of time. And the courts, though, have found that that period of time is very long. And they look at what is the last material step that immigration has made. So if the ball is in your court and you've failed to provide them something, you're done. There's no way mandamus is ever going to work for you. But if the government has had a material last step, and it's probably been over 5 years, then you're probably in a situation where mandamus is a reasonable application for you to make. But that's a long time, usually.
All right, here's a good question. And I'm not sure if I have this answer, Messi. He says, I don't have any foreign work experience, but I have 1 year continuous work experience. Oh yeah. Okay. I have 1 year continuous work experience from inside Canada, 2015 to 2016. Is that eligible for FSW? That's a good question. I've looked at this, Alicia, in the past, and I've had conflicting information, because at its very core, it's Canadian work experience, and the eligibility for the FSW is foreign work experience. And so I've heard of people who have taken a run at that, and an officer hasn't caught it, and it has gone through. But that has always been the issue when you look at the actual wording in the regulations and within the ministerial instructions for express entry. It doesn't talk about just general work experience for FSW eligibility. It's it's either Canadian or foreign. So I would be reluctant to try to put that forward as eligibility for FSW. The reality is, and the reason he's asking this question, everyone, is because you only have a 3-year window to qualify for CEC, and this work experience is outside of that. So Messi, I think it would be a real stretch to be able to convince an officer that would work, when it was Canadian and not foreign, even though at its core, it shouldn't make a difference. It should actually be better, right? In a way. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Alicia.
Go check those ministerial instructions really carefully again too, and just read through that line by line and in the definition of foreign work experience.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Rezada says, CEC July 2021 applicant. Can I do mandamus now? And why does CPC Edmonton? Okay, so this is kind of a continuation. Sorry, missed info last time. Thanks for your excellent work. Okay, so takes so many months to a year more than what other CPC take. I don't know if that's true. So I know that there is definitely variations within the inland offices and how long that they, how long they're taking to process. And yep, I have no doubt in my mind that Edmonton is dragging on so very, very slow. But I don't think there is, it would be really hard to say, file a mandamus application when you just submitted it July 2021, right? That's the key here. So we're talking we're 6 months, 7, 8 months. And we're talking years, Alicia, right? We're talking, they haven't done anything for 2 years, 3 years. We're not talking a month, 4 months, 6, 8 months. And also the government has been relying on the pandemic as a shield for a very long time with those applications. Well, since the beginning of the pandemic. So they're going to throw that out as a defense and say, look, we would love to do this, but but we can't because of lockdowns, etc. So Mandamus
That's right.
is not a great solution unless you're looking at something that's been lagging even before the pandemic for years.
Yeah. The other risk with Edmonton, sometimes you've had your application processed in a different office and you get a note that they're switching the processing to CPC Edmonton, and that's always alarm bells start ringing because they might be looking into misrep or something in your
Yeah.
background that doesn't quite match up. So
Yes.
if your file has been transferred to Edmonton,
Yeah.
beware.
Yeah. And I'll ring the bell. Mr. Rezada, I recommend that you book a consult so that we can see. Because for a CEC application, they don't just send those to a local office unless they've got concerns about something. And so the first thing you do is request those GCMS notes, and see if you can see what's going on there. And sometimes that will then allow us to preempt and proactively try to send some other information in to correct whatever issue they have a concern with. But this is not a good deal at all. It's not a matter of why are they not processing? Oh my goodness, you've got far, far more problems. And in the old days for work permits, sometimes they would, for program integrity purposes, kick it to a different, secondary review. But even for those purposes, there's usually, where there's smoke, there's fire. So yeah, be very, very careful. Okay, Ajmal says BC PNP skilled worker program, skill level 0 and A, says don't need to submit valid language requirement. Website never says what CLB level is required. My question is CLB 6 is okay. And this is another one, Ajmal, when it comes to these programs. Like, I don't know, Alicia, if you have any insight on this. Yeah, I don't know if you have any insight on this question here.
Yeah, I mean, so BC PNP has two streams. They have the Immigrant Skills program, and then they have the Express Entry BC program. And each program, they're kind of parallel. They have a program manual that's a number of pages. I think it's about 80 pages long, and it goes through each
Yeah.
program requirement. And so if they're saying that they don't have a CLB requirement in that program manual, then it's possible that you just need to be able to prove that you have a functional capacity in your English. And so it depends on which test you took. It depends on what you mean by 6, right? Was that every single band? Was that your overall score? If there's anything that drops below a certain score, sometimes that's a problem. So it's hard to be able to answer this question without getting further information. So in general, take a look at that program specific, really detailed guide to see
Yeah.
what they say in there. And the BCPNP is also really quite good. So sometimes you can call them and ask to speak to somebody in the program to see if you can get further information about your program that you've specifically applied for, depending on what it is.
Yeah. And I'll just share my screen just a little bit. So like Alicia said, like the information is usually here. So this is basic Q&A section here. And you can see here, do I have to take a language test to register or apply for one of the express entry BC categories? Well, they say, yes, you must meet the minimum requirements for the relevant federal category. So FSW is basically your 6. It's the CLB 7 is the minimum criteria. And then for CEC, it's the 5 if you're a NOC B, and if you're an A or an O, it's a 7. So so that's often what happens if there's silence, if it is through express entry. And but they've got more information right here, and I just direct you to go back there, and you can see this right here is just the express entry BC facts. And
yes, you'd have to go to the skills
yep,
instead of
yep,
express entry.
yeah. And so you can, so as an example, so the skills immigration, they have that. So go through their search, the actual, you should be able to find that information in there.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Couple more here and then we'll wrap up. Let's see here. Okay. So Rob says, I have an active profile eligible for FSW with CRS 468. Should I consider pursuing a 1-year course? Oh yeah. I'll let you answer this one, Alicia. We can answer this one pretty quick. To improve my chances, right now I'm in India, 4 years of skill A experience.
Oh gosh.
Not 1
So
year.
yeah, yeah. So no 1-year courses, right? Really, really look at what your current education has been, look at what your career trajectory has been so far. If you're wanting to do a study permit, it needs to make sense for your career. The program needs to fit with what you've been doing 2-year programs. Look at 2-year programs. Make sure that you find something that is a logical fit for you and that you can't get locally. And so if it's something that you can do locally, that study permit's probably not going to be approved. So it has to be something unique, and it has to be something where your Canadian education can improve your career trajectory or chances in your home country. So
Well,
find something that fits.
yeah, and this is where the consultations that our clients have with us, even that 25-minute consult, can help to get you sorted and on the right track. Because like Alicia said, everybody is doing this now because there's no draws. And so IRCC knows this, and they're looking for every way possible to cull out, especially the people that they know are just using study to get PR. And that's not the basis for this program. So in the consultation, we can actually canvas this. We can look at your history. We can look at where you're thinking at study. We can break down, how the approach could potentially work to increase your chances. But like we've talked about, we can do everything right. Alicia did a rock solid application for another client, and we recently got the refusal from India, like many of our colleagues across the country, where we've got a really, really good case for judicially reviewing it. And that's probably the direction that we're going to go. And it's almost to the stage now from India or other countries like that, where there's high volumes, where you almost have to go into the study permit application. If you're in this type of a situation, knowing that it's likely your study permit's going to get refused, and you'll have to take that next step to judicially review it, or at least apply. And then, hopefully DOJ is going to consent. So that's almost the approach that we're taking with these now because of this. Okay. All right. Casey says, I applied to the TR to PR and also under the open work permit under TR to PR. Can I change employer while my application is still on process? How can I get a work authorization while my application is on process? So I'm assuming it's the bridge that she's applied for, and this is TR to PR pathway. So Alicia, do you want to tackle this one?
So if you did have AOR and you did that bridging open work permit for TR to PR program, then it should be an open work permit. You shouldn't have to have an employer specific, but do be really careful. Dig out your work permit, take a look at it, look at the conditions, and it'll say employer. And then if it says any, if you're authorized to work for any employer, that means it's an open work permit. If in the employer section it lists a specific employer, you have a problem and you're going to have to sort that out. But if it says any employer, then yes, you can change your employers. Technically, you should notify immigration if there's a material change in your application. But as long as you still have your status and your address hasn't changed, if it has, then notify immigration. Yeah. But as long as you still have valid status at the time that your TR to PR application is processed and approved, then that's what's required for program eligibility for TR to PR.
You bet. And I'm also just going to, that's a little loud, but I'm just going to start this. This is the sign here. We're going to answer one more question here. And this is a continuation of Sukdeep. So he says that he's targeting the ONP French that doesn't have a knock restriction to it. And I don't think, Sukdeep, that our advice would actually change much in terms of the volatility to artificially deflating your score. Anything can happen. There's no guarantee that even with the French stream that they're going to leave it at 467. The PNPs are programs of policy. They're creatures of policy. They can make any changes they want at any point in time, including what the range is for those draws, and we just don't know. So, ultimately that's a decision that you're going to have to make, but it's definitely not something that we can say, yeah, go for it. You could lose out. Like you literally could. So, yeah. So that's kind of it. All right. Well, Alicia, that's kind of, we had a lot of good questions there. And I know that there were a number of people that had questions that didn't get answered. Remember that, we try to answer these as broadly as we can to be able to help as many people as possible. But, in the end, we know we can't get to all of you. If you have something that's specific, just like you've seen, if it's specific, what do I do? This is my situation. Slide over to our site, click on the link below, book a consult, and in that 25 minutes, we can guide you. Ultimately, you may choose to retain us. You may choose to change complete paths and directions that you're looking at, but that's what we do. And so thanks, Alicia. Any final parting words for this wonderful weekend ahead of us?
Well, hang in there, right? Keep going, stay strong, make sure that you're looking for your options, but you know, don't give up.
I guess I'll touch on one last question. So IRB Fox says, curious to know, is your express entry course and TR to PR course the same? Just in case the TR is reintroduced, would you revive the TR to PR course? Absolutely. And I'll also tell you, Mr. or Ms. Fox, that if they created a brand new program from scratch, which is entirely possible, you will see a course to help you navigate it. All right.
Mark
Thanks.
won't sleep. He
I
will
will
he will
not
make a
sleep,
course.
just like before. 4 days straight, no sleep. That was the TR to PR. But I'll tell you, Alicia, the people that benefited from it, like it was astounding how many people were able to go through and are now PRs because of it. So, yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, thanks so much. We'll see you next Wednesday for sure when I go live with my next Q&A. And Alicia, maybe you're back on Thursday, I think. We had a
Thursday should be
special
fine
time
next
today.
week.
Yeah. No band trips for the kids.
No volunteering all day.
Okay. All right. See you guys.